You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. Some days it seems like you close the doors and they come in through the windows. We were marching in the streets over the Roe v. Wade Supreme Court decision to come, and all the while a lone gunman, white supremacist killer, was gearing up to massacre African Americans in Buffalo. So I thought that perhaps today's show should be about, from, and dedicated to two women who persevered and simply would not give up. Two very different kinds of women. My guest for the conversation this week is Sallie Bingham, a celebrated writer whose prize-winning works have spanned novels, poetry, memoir, journalism, essays, and plays, and who, virtually single-handedly, brought down a vast newspaper empire in Kentucky, and with it a family of enormous inherited wealth, privilege, and power. She did so for women, for herself, and for a free press. And best of all, she's a fine writer. And the second woman, for once I'll even give you a wee preview of Fighting Words, is a different kind of journalist, one who took on Vladimir Putin live on air over the war in Ukraine. So wait for that in Fighting Words at the end of the program. Now, both these women will not be rushed, nor should they be. They each require additional time. So for today, we will not go inside the headlines, but instead we will go directly to the conversation with Sallie Bingham. And that's coming right up. Subscribe to this program on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. Follow us on Twitter at WMC Live, like our Facebook page at facebook.com/WMC Live, and visit us at WMCLive.com for more information about our show and our guests. My guest for today's conversation is Sallie Bingham, an old friend and also an American author, playwright, poet, teacher, feminist activist, and philanthropist. She's the eldest daughter of Barry Bingham Sr., patriarch of the Bingham family of Louisville, Kentucky, which dominated the news media of the state and the city for most of the 20th century. She, however, is an artist. Her first novel was published by Houghton Mifflin in 1961, followed by 4 collections of short stories. Her latest, published by Saraban Books in October 2011, is titled Mending, New and Selected Stories, and she's also published 6 additional novels, 3 collections of poetry, numerous plays produced off-Broadway and regionally, and the well-known family memoir, Passion and Prejudice, brought out by Knopf in 1989. Her short stories have appeared in the Atlantic Monthly, New Letters, Greensboro Review, the Southwest Review, among many others, and have been anthologized in Best American Short Stories and in Prize Stories, the O. Henry Awards, and more. She's worked as a book editor for the Courier-Journal in Louisville and has been a director for the National Book Critics Circle. She's founder of the Kentucky Foundation for Women, which published The American Voice, and founder of the Sallie Bingham Center for Women's History and Culture at Duke University. And her memoir, Passion and Prejudice, we'll discuss that today. We'll also discuss 2 or 3 recent books, including Treason, a Sallie Bingham reader, and Silver Swan, the biography of Doris Duke, and her latest baby, Little Brother, a memoir. about her younger brother, Jonathan. Here is Sallie Bingham. Sallie, welcome to Women's Media Center Live.
I'm delighted to be here.
Well, it's a delight to have you here. You know what? I have come to a conclusion that you are a cross between Edith Wharton and Ishmael, a fictional character, of course, in Moby Dick, because Ishmael was alone, escaped to tell, and Edith Wharton wrote with merciless compassion. But merciless, with a
merciless compassion,
about the very wealthy. And this is what you have done again and again and again. I think that the Bingham family, their greatest mistake was to give birth to a real writer.
And they would agree with you.
Well, they screwed that one up big time, because you tell the truth. You do so in an extraordinarily elegant fashion. I mean, it's a real writer. It's a writer's eye. It's a writer's ear for dialogue. It's this book. We'll talk about some of the others too, but this book, Little Brother, a memoir, is the story of a younger brother, Jonathan, in the great, powerful, wealthy, inherited wealth and political power as well. Friend of the Roosevelts. Your grandfather was ambassador to Great Britain. Your father owned basically all Kentucky newspapers, and in Passion and Prejudice, your first volume of memoir, you relate the story of how you, one sole woman with a pen, brought that empire down. So talk about what made you write this one.
Well, Robin, as the years have passed, and there are many years, as you know, since Jonathan's death in the early 60s, I've noticed that he's been completely erased. There isn't a single photograph of him that anybody in the family ever displays. He's never mentioned. I don't think my nieces and nephews and my grandchildren even know he existed. And that seemed to me just grotesque.
Yeah.
If he had died in some way a hero, been killed in World War II or something, that would be entirely different. There would be all kinds of memories and praises and photographs and oil portraits and so on.
Well, that would
but
be
instead
manly.
He's just erased. Yes, he was not able to even imitate the manliness that he knew was expected of him. He certainly knew what was expected, but it was just not in his particular character to imitate that. I think in a later age, when things were finally a little more open and relaxed, he might well have decided that he was gay. That wasn't possible in the 40s and 50s. The repercussions would have been so severe. And it was something that our parents would never have countenanced. As is often the case with those families, they had many gay friends, but they would never have acknowledged that these polite extra men were anything but sort of bachelors who hadn't found the right woman yet.
Yeah, he was a closeted man in a closeted family in a closeted time.
Yes.
And a sensitive, neurotic man who could never, and he was the third son. You point that out very tellingly.
Yeah.
There already was an heir and a spare. And so he was the third son, and they made such merciless fun of him, Sallie. They called him. His nickname was Mr. Toad or Uncle Toad from Wind in the Willows. It's just so incredibly cruel. They referred to him as not being handsome. They referred to him as the little sort of ugly duckling, and it's interesting. I learned so much from this book, which kept me up till all hours, I might add, because he was, poor Jonathan, he was the epitome of white male privilege. And yet I wept for him, and it cut through. This is a heartbreaking book and an incredibly perceptive one. because
Thank you.
you see him through your eyes of his older sister, who's a child herself, not that much older than
Yeah.
him, and who doesn't understand, doesn't fathom the doings of this family, for whom, quote, touch was prohibited.
Yeah.
Oh, God, that line leapt out of the book for me and made my eyes tear. So it is so, and they didn't know better either, that you don't portray this family as evil. They just, it just didn't touch children. They didn't pick them up when they cried. They were very, they were elegant. They were white. They were Southern gentry. They took alcoholism for granted because that was something their class did. And this was fascinating to me. They were liberal Democrats. They were friends of FDR and Eleanor, and so it taught me also gave me a double take on that.
Yes.
You can't,
and that was full of ambiguities. Of course, that friendship was the reward for these huge political donations that they had been making to FDR for all of his campaigns. And traditionally, the reward for that is, well, first of all, you get to be friends, in quotes. Your calls are answered, your letters are answered, and then, of course, you have the hope of an ambassadorship at the end of the road somewhere. But it's very telling because, where they fell apart as progressive Democrats was in the whole issue of race.
Of course.
Because there's one letter from my father, I don't think I quote it in this book, where Eleanor Roosevelt had been making a tour of the country sometime in the 40s, and she had been seen riding in an open car with an African-American woman. And since it was in Kentucky, he was tasked with writing her and explaining that, of course, he admired what she was doing, but that it was just totally unacceptable, and she should really be very cautious about showing herself in public with an African-American woman. And her response was quite brisk. It was something like, "Thank you for your letter, Barry. I hear what you're saying to me, and I intend to go on in the way I have always gone on."
God. Well, this is what you very tellingly write. I marked this passage. "We children of privilege had known black people intimately, since they took care of us, but never as equals, never in our schools. The black people we knew shook their heads at such radical change. Although his newspapers supported integration, both father and mother were bound by the prejudices of their childhoods. Like many other Southern Democrats, their treatment of black people was ground fine," here's the writer speaking, "between the gears of civility and racism. We grew up breathing the dust of those contradictions. The gears ground fine, but not evenly. Years later, an African-American friend of mine asked me to see if my father would inquire into a conspicuous injustice she'd been subjected to by a local foundation. He refused, saying they could not believe that white people he knew, whom he saw at dinner parties, receptions, and the Kentucky Derby itself, would behave in such a manner. Familiarity," you write, "doesn't always breed contempt. It breeds denial." That's the writer talking.
Thank you. I love that passage too, because it really sums up the whole contradiction. That they would have been expected by me too to champion this woman who had been denied some money from a foundation for bogus reasons. But of course, that went too far because the social claim was always the top claim, not justice.
Right. The compartmentalization is breathtaking. It's just where the moats fill up and the portcullises come down and the towers are fled to. But up until that point, oh my God, yes, of course, FDR's programs in the abstract are terrific, and you back them, and you write editorials in your newspapers about them, and you have enormous influence, and you manage not to know. It is a tutorial. I don't mean to trivialize in any way its literary merit, but it is also a tutorial in nuance, this book. And you've done a fine, fine job. Really, it's extraordinary. How I have to say, okay, so you escaped like Ishmael to tell. And first you did it hopefully through marriage, and because you married a literary persona, Whitney Ellsworth of the New York Review of Books. And then, there were other husbands, and finally you came into your own as a prize-winning writer, which is what you're really known for. How in hell did you escape? Seriously.
Whew. Well, many people are trapped in what a friend of mine called the labyrinth of nostalgia about the past.
Yeah.
I've never been trapped in that because from the very beginning, I knew that I was being subjected to so much bad treatment, so much neglect, abuse on the part of my older brother. And I couldn't really glamorize that past, even though, I had all these nice clothes and went to parties and so on. But what was going on underneath was so clear to me. And therefore, as soon as I could get out of there, I did by going to Radcliffe, which wasn't really an escape, but it seemed like an escape at the time.
Yep.
And just deciding that I would never live in the South again, no matter what. And of course, I didn't for many years until I was stronger and could hold my own. But I think it's those who have seen what the reality of this kind of life is like that escape.
Yeah.
Because we're not enchanted by it. How could we be enchanted by it?
Well, the rest of them were.
The truth.
The rest of them
they were.
They were.
They were. And, my three brothers are now long dead. My younger sister is still alive. And I want to ask her if she was aware. Of course, she was the baby in the family, so it was probably quite a different experience for her. But she had it, too, because I remember when she was about 4, and we had a little bit of snow in Kentucky, which was very rare.
Yeah.
And Mother was pulling her on a sled and said to me in exasperation, "I'm too old to do this."
Huh. With her in earshot. And she could hear it.
Yeah. So I think Eleanor, who also is quite perceptive, but has stayed there. And of course, one of the things that makes any kind of escape almost impossible is if you cannot physically relocate. Because you're going to see these people all the time.
That's right.
They're going to be your friends. They're going to be very kind to you, very hospitable. You're going to go to the Derby and sit in their box and sing My Old Kentucky Home. I don't think you can do it if you're still there. I really don't.
You have to literally get out.
You have to literally get out.
Yeah.
You have to literally get out. And then, of course, going back, which I finally did, led to what most people viewed as a catastrophe.
Well, I don't. I think the feminist movement thinks it was rah-rah. I mean, because
it was.
You struck a blow for press freedom, for women's rights, for feminism, for yourself, for other women, all at the same time. And you would not back down. The Bingham,
no, I really wouldn't.
The Bingham Empire, this is for listeners who haven't yet and should do not walk to get a copy of Passion and Prejudice. This is the story of how, it was assumed that the women on the board of the newspapers owned by Daddy would shut up and be nice, and the men would make the decisions. It was assumed that was true of everything, being a combination of wealth and Southern graces. So it was doubly lethal. And Sallie said, "Excuse me," and voiced her opinion, and then voiced it again and again and again, and in the long run brought down the empire and received, I might add, enormous opprobrium for doing so. Because this, and I've got it from the left as well, because this was liberal newspapers in the South.
Yes.
So how could you possibly harm this Bingham empire of great journalism, And yet you did so. And you were the only person who did so, not the brothers, not Eleanor. She may have been sympathetic, but she didn't. Only you. It is fascinating how this one plucky wench, this plucky wench of the week award, managed to get out. Because, look, let's face it, there are a whole lot of people, left and right, less so in this case on the right, who feel that women have inherited wealth. Well, they suffer in comfort, so we don't have to pay that much attention to them. You got out, and you then turned what you did retain, which was not inconsiderable, but on the other hand was not, we're not talking Bill Gates here.
No,
or Jim, or Bezos of Amazon. You turned that into work you turned your life into literature, and you turned what you did have in terms of funding to the women's movement. You founded
Kentucky Foundation for Women,
Yep, and the Sallie Bingham Center for Women's History and Culture at Duke University. I mean, give me a break, and all the while being rather prolific, I would say. You just come out now with, I've got 3 wonderful books on my desk. I've got Silver Swan, which is the story of Doris Duke, of whom you are most qualified, to write. And Treason, I love this title. I wish I could steal it, which is a Sallie Bingham reader, and Little Brother, this newest one, the memoir. So I really, and you've had 3 great sons, and you've had a terrific life, but you got out. You got out. Did you leave breadcrumbs?
Well, the breadcrumbs are the women's movement. Because, Robin, I could never have done it without that support.
Yeah.
Way back, Gloria Steinem put my photograph on the cover of Ms.
Yeah.
She wrote a really perceptive article about what it meant for this monopoly newspaper and its adjunct businesses to be sold. And I had a wonderful feminist lawyer who stuck by me through the whole ordeal. I could never have done it alone in that hostile situation. I'm forever grateful to the women's movement because, nobody seems to recognize this, but a lot of what we know is social change has come about because of the women's movement. Would never have happened.
Absolutely.
Black lives would never have happened.
Yeah.
None of that would have happened without the groundwork laid by the fighting feminists, of whom you were, of course, prominent, of the 70s and 80s.
Well, Black Lives Matter was founded by 3 women. Many people don't know that.
Exactly.
But and the offspring of the women's movement, this wave, have been at the heart of the environmental movement, of all of the different ethnic specific movements, Asian Pacific and Latina, and without question. But interestingly enough, there still is a kind of raised eyebrow discrimination that you must have received about wealthy women or women of inherited wealth.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And it's just what you said, that somehow, are they weeping in a corner because they have so much money? That's not anything anybody's going to have any sympathy for. The fact is that we have such potent weapons to work for social change, not that many of us seem able to use them.
Yeah.
But it's partly because these still inherited wealth usually comes from the man, a father or a husband. And that it can be very disabling.
Yeah.
Is it really my money?
Paralyzing.
Paralyzing. So it will only be probably in a few generations down the road when women get into the corporate world and begin to make these huge fortunes that men have been making all along, that'll be clear, this is my money. I made this money.
Right.
And then we just hope that there's a strong enough push towards social justice, and particularly for women, that maybe we can finally pass the ERA. These foundational things that somehow just never happen.
I know. Well, here we are, all these years later. Still, now we will shortly be back at square one on abortion.
Yeah.
I mean,
we are.
It is
there we go, right back again.
Believable. It is just not believable,
Yeah,
So,
and it's all about trying to control women. It isn't about anything else.
That's right.
And this has been the problem all along with anything we try to do, is if it looks like we're escaping the control of the men who are in charge, we're really going to suffer. There's going to be a lot of repercussions.
Oh, backlash
and all
is
this
huge.
nonsense
Yeah.
about when life begins and so on, that really is it's totally irrelevant.
Of course it
It's
is.
not what anybody cares about. It's
No.
just a cover.
No,
And,
no.
oh, Robin, I must mention to you, because this is the dark side of my story, that my youngest son, Will, died 5 years ago, frozen to death in a Colorado blizzard, having suffered all his life from another form of privilege, which is you have all this opportunity and you don't know how to use it.
Oh, Sallie. You
So
do. You do mention that at the beginning when you speak of the dreadful, line, the members of your family who have died violently in different ways. But that's such a heartbreak. Oh my God.
It's a heartbreak, and I occasionally think if I had not been a writer and had just been a full-time mom, would this have happened? Of course, that's a dead end.
Yeah, well,
way
it
to
is
think.
Because it's happened to full-time moms, and they didn't even write.
Exactly, it does. It does.
No.
So my next book is going to be called Will's Things, and it's another memoir, I think my last, based on what he had in his pockets when he froze to death. And starting from there to tell his brief, sad story of what he had hoped to do and wasn't able to do.
How old was he when he died?
47.
Oh, God.
And, this lifelong combination of addiction and what we call psychiatric problems, we don't really know what they are, but that combination,
Well,
so
it's all the more extraordinary that you have kept writing through all of this. I mean, I know what that means. I mean, when I'm in a bad way, what I tend to try to do is write my way through it.
Me too.
And if I can't, then I know I'm really in a bad way.
I know, then you're really stuck.
Yeah, really
in
stuck.
more ways than one.
Oh, God, yeah. But so far I've been able to, to get away in the beginning, to stand your ground in the face of extraordinary opposition from all sides, to create a life for yourself that was affirmative and creative and also a joy to the rest of us, I mean, who can be readers, is no small thing. Is no small thing,
thank you,
my
Robin.
dear.
And I was lucky to have an early example of how much trouble I was going to get into, because when I was a sophomore in college, I wrote a short story called Winter Term that caused an enormous storm and all kinds of attempts to get me to suppress it, which it was totally unexpected from my point of view. I never had thought anything that I wrote could arouse that kind of opposition. So, right then I had to decide, okay, am I going to cave in and just, it's just a short story, I'll just let it go, it's too much trouble, and so on and so on. Right then, you make that decision whether you're going to cave in or not.
Well, clearly you were the original Steel Magnolia, my dear.
And you know how I feel about that, Robin. I don't want to be either Steel or Magnolia.
I know. I think we're better off with Ishmael and Edith Wharton.
Oh, I do too. I think that's a wonderful combination.
Oh, dear Sallie. Well, again, the book, listeners, is Little Brother, a Memoir. It has this heartbreaking picture on the front of this maybe 3-4-year-old little boy, all dressed up with big dark glasses. Also, be sure and get Treason, which is a Sallie Bingham reader, and The Silver Swan, which is Sallie's biography of Doris Duke. And if you haven't read Passion and Prejudice, go back and read it right now, and you will understand why I say that it's a miracle that you escaped. And I'm awfully glad you did, and I'm so glad we were on the same planet at the same time, my dear.
Oh, it's enormously fortunate, Robin. It really is. We need to be honored, and we are to some degree honored, but at least we honor each other.
Exactly. Thanks so much, Sallie. Take care.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much.
I'll return in just a moment with some fighting words. The Women's Media Center, founded in 2005 by Jane Fonda, Gloria Steinem, and myself, is a progressive, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization working to make women visible and powerful in media. You can learn more about the WMC at womensmediacenter.com.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
We shall not be moved. Those are fighting words. I'm indebted to Sven Liljenström, the founder of the Faces of Democracy Initiative, for this interview, excerpts of which you will hear here, in that he spoke with the 43-year-old television editor Marina Ovsyannikova, who held up a poster on Vremya, the main news program on Russian state television, and became an icon for freedom of speech and the press overnight. I told you we would return to this story and stay on it to see what happened to her, and we're doing just that. I refer you for the full interview to the Faces of Democracy Initiative. In a matter of minutes, you became a global icon for freedom of the press and freedom of expression, and a champion of democracy. What do democracy and democratic values mean to you personally? Answer. For me, democracy means being able to live as a free person. However, my home country, Russia, has recently turned into a totalitarian state, increasingly closing itself off from the outside world. Communication has been affected as well. Virtually all independent media outlets are blocked or classified as foreign agents, and most social media platforms are no longer accessible. State-directed information propaganda is now almost the only news sources for the Russian people, leading to an information vacuum, which we have to overcome. I have always enjoyed traveling and talking to many different people. Therefore, democratic values are not empty phrases for me. On the contrary, these values mean that people in Russia can exchange their views with the whole world and express their point of view instead of living as obedient slaves in a totalitarian country. Let's talk about the sign you held up on March 14th during a live broadcast on Russian state television. What happened immediately afterward? How did your colleagues react? Answer. My desire to protest had been growing for many years. I disagreed with the policy of the channel, Persevere Canal, as well as with some other developments that occurred and still occur in our country. The wish to speak out was simmering inside me, but for personal reasons I could not quit immediately. However, that changed abruptly with the start of the war. It was clear to me that I could not work for Persevere Canal one day longer. In the heat of the moment, I considered going to Manishnaya Square to protest, but at the last moment my son stopped me. I had the idea for holding up a poster the following weekend. I went to the stationery store around the corner, bought a highlighter and some paper. At home I drew the poster, and by Monday I knew. It was now or never. My original plan was to place myself more in the background of the TV studio. However, at the last moment I felt a strong emotional impulse. I decided to run into the studio, cross a security barrier, and stand directly behind the presenter. Everything happened in a flash. The security guard, a nice girl, had no time to get her bearings, let alone understand what had just happened. Anything like this had happened in the 50-year history of Vremya. After a few seconds, I left the studio, looking calm on the outside, and walked down the central corridor. The entire management team was already coming towards me. I had to make a written statement in the office of the deputy director. Then the police, who had been called in, escorted me to my office. The atmosphere was unreal. All the employees present just stood there looking at me, completely dazed. They didn't understand what had happened. They didn't understand how something like this could happen at all. Question. On the German talk show Markus Lanz, you said you wanted to wake up Russians who had been turned into zombies by Russian propaganda. Do you think you succeeded? Answer. Judging by the fact that most people around me think the same way I do, it's hard to judge how successful the campaign was in the end. My friends, neighbors, and acquaintances support me as much as they can. Many people have written me or commented on my statement in social media. But when I ask people why they don't take to the streets, why they don't take action themselves, the answer is usually, we're afraid. It's better not to get involved in politics. Question. Since March 4th, Russia has issued prison sentences of up to 15 years for unpopular reporting. What does this mean for journalism? Is it enough to wake people up if they don't dare to demonstrate? Answer. No, of course that's not enough. People form their opinions, but state propaganda in Russia is very advanced. Just today I read in a recent poll that 81% of people in Russia support Putin's actions. I don't know if this poll result is true and if this data can be trusted. My perception is that more than half of Russians do not support this war. On Saturday, protests again took place in Moscow and many other cities in Russia. Several dozen people were arrested, but the masses are keeping quiet. People are really afraid. Nevertheless, there are some, albeit few, people in Russia who are willing to put everything on the line, their lives as well as the lives of their families, all in the name of active protest. Question. You said you're surprised that you've not yet been convicted for the poster you held. Do you think Putin is using your media publicity to portray himself as a champion of the rule of law? Answer. After my protest moment, the leaders of Persevere Canal kept silent for a week. They did not know how to react. They screened me on the basis of all available sources, and not only me, but my relatives as well. Only a week later, my direct superior, Kirill Klymianov, went public with a report claiming that I was a British spy, which is totally absurd. Since then, I have had the feeling that I'm being watched at every turn. Many people ask me the one question, why aren't you in prison? I think that to some extent Russian propaganda is fine with me communicating with Western media. It may be that my notoriety, at least at the moment, serves the Kremlin's interests. I cannot say what the leading FSB forces of our country think, but there are active calls to put me behind bars. A new administrative procedure was initiated, but 2 days later was withdrawn. Now my lawyers are waiting to see what charges will be brought. We're waiting to see what will happen next. Relations between Russia and the West, this is a question, have reached a low point since the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Do you think a normalization of relations under Putin is realistic? Answer. Absolutely not. Under Putin, normal relations are impossible. Russia has been engaged in aggressive propaganda against the West and all Western values for the last 10 years. During that entire time, people in this country have been led to believe that the West is trying to destroy Russia, that America and Britain are our enemies, and so is Western media. This propaganda is repeated in the insane shows on TV. There are shows where Ukrainians are consistently labeled as nationalists and fascists. If they continually repeat that black is actually white, people will eventually believe it. We have been very aggressive on television all these years. In fact, there was state information propaganda in all the media directed specifically against the West. A whole generation has grown up with Putin's propaganda. It is simply terrible. I think that nothing will change under Vladimir Putin. It will only be possible if a new generation of leaders is elected, a generation that does not think in the patterns of the Cold War. Only then will we be able to patch up our battered relations with the West. Question. This is a personal question. How did your family and close friends react to your protest action on Russian television? Were there people who advised against it? Answer. The situation is very difficult. My son, my mother, and I have completely opposite political views. My mother belongs to the older generation. She listens to state propaganda from morning to night, listens to Vladimir Soloviev. Therefore, it is impossible to talk to her or convince her of anything else. I have often tried to establish a kind of dialogue with her. Mom, I'm working. I know how to do it. Listen to me. But she doesn't understand anything. She answers using recited phrases from TV or radio, like the West is our enemy, that everyone wants to destroy our country. This is why I can't talk to my mother for more than 5 minutes. We have completely contradictory sets of values. When we start talking about political issues, we always end up arguing. So I don't even try. Even my son does not support me. He says I ruined the family's life, also because I got a divorce. In addition, his father, that is my ex-husband, works for another government propaganda channel, RT. So we're on two opposite sides of the information war. He fully supports the Kremlin propaganda. I, on the other hand, have more liberal views. Accordingly, my ex-husband teaches our children his values, while I try to give them a different perspective. Fortunately, my daughter is still small. She does not understand the political connections, but she senses what is happening right now in and with our family. Thank you very much for the interview, Ms. Ovsyannikova. And that's part of the personal cost. And that's our show for this week. You can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and now Instagram at @TheRobinMorgan. And you can check out my blog at robinmorgan.net and find my latest book of poems, Dark Matter, and my brand new novel, Parallax, wherever books are sold. Opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the Women's Media Center. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. Executive producer as well as founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. WMC president and co-executive producer of this program, Julie Burton. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us. Join us again next time on Women's Media Center Live.